Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hey now, and hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside the good Father Joe Grimaldi, Father Giuseppe Grimaldi, and I'd like to welcome you to the Father Joe Podcast. The Father Joe Podcast is proudly supported by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield. The Spring Savings Sales event is going on now, but only until May 31st. Star Lincoln has added incredible one-time only dealer incentives that most likely will never be repeated. Check out these additional incentive enhancements available to all current Lincoln and Ford owners. You'll get $2,000 additional savings on the 2019 MKZ. You'll get $1,500 on the 2019 MKC. $500 cash back on the 2019 Nautilus, the hottest SUV on the road. And coming in any day, it's the all-new Lincoln Aviator, the star of the North American International Auto Show. In a hurry? Shop online at starlincoln.com or call us 248-354-4900. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield, home of the Star Treatment. All right, I got some bad news for you.
All right, tell me.
Lots and lots of people don't believe in God anymore. You know what they call those people? Atheists.
Oh.
Yeah, there's also a group out there that I just read about called Agnostics.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between...
I was going to ask you.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you what the difference is?
Well, go ahead.
Atheists, according to what I read, just flat out, they don't believe in God. Nope. When you die, the light switch goes off, you're out of here.
Against Theo. Theo is God, but keep going.
Okay.
And the A in front of it is opposed to any God.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So going. Atypical, right?
Yes.
Atypical.
Not typical.
Not typical. Okay, so...
And Theo is God.
What does Gnostic mean, then?
Agnostic, I think, are people that have no faith at all.
They have no faith, but they don't doubt necessarily that there might be, leaving themselves a little hope.
Yeah. Is that how they give the definition there?
More or less.
Yeah, okay.
They don't really want to say, because agnostics they don't want to say they're leaving open a little room for a possibility, but they just don't. They're more of a don't know, don't care.
Sure.
Whereas atheists will flat out go, don't bring that here.
I don't believe it.
There's nothing in my fiber, nothing. You know, our old joke about you won't find many atheists on a plane going down.
Sure.
Well, this is the one guy that would say, well, this is it. I'm done. That was it. You know, in 30 seconds,
It's like stomping out an ant.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, little fella. You know, hated to do that to you, but you had to go.
Yeah.
There's 15 billion more where you came from. Anyhow, stop it, Ken. Stop it. What's the basis for somebody, this is really rhetorical, what would cause somebody to just arrive from infancy on through their entire life, just have no interest in knowing anything, nor ever believe in God?
I think it's hard to say, because there might be a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. But primarily, if you've grown up in an atmosphere where parents don't believe in God, that is a possibility. However, you find the opposite is true too, that very often people that do grow up in an area where there's no religion involved, all of a sudden people start to get curious, the children do, and they seek out some sort of spiritualism. But as I say, I think essentially it's if you grow up in a family where there is no reference to a God, I could see where an individual would not want to have a reference to God.
I wonder if a family like that almost teaches their children to not believe in God. That would seem to me that they would suggest, by worrying about it and not passing it along, that they do believe in God. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just wonder, very often you have people that say, well, I want my children to make up their own minds.
Yes.
So we're not going to give them any type of religion as they're growing up. Now, once they start asking questions and they're interested in truly learning on their own, we'll go ahead with whatever they decide.
This says, despite attending CCD since first grade, our teenager recently said that there's no proof that God exists. that going to church is a waste of time, and that he doesn't believe in God. Apparently, most of his friends, families, they're not religious, and I'm fearful that the ever-present distractions in life that are vying for his attention are luring him away from God. This feels like potentially my biggest failure in life, and I could use some good advice on approaches. This was sent to, again, at catholicscomehome.org. That was in the frame of a question.
Of a parent's questioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can see where apparently, despite attending catechism, this particular 16-year-old has decided, heard enough, seen enough, I'm out.
Okay. I'm just going to, and I'm not trying to get away from the initial question, but I'm saying is this, that we are surrounded by all sorts of ideas that more than we've ever had before in the past. With television, with the internet, the tweeting, all of these different things. We have more information than we can handle. And so often, part of that lures us away from our family beliefs and our family ties. You know, years ago, when you grew up with a mother and father that went to Mass on Sunday, well, a child did the same thing, and when they grew up, maybe they didn't do it right away, but as soon as they had their first child, they would go back to church and so on.
Yeah.
But now it's a whole different story. I think that people are battling so many different sources of attention that it's hard to know where they're going to turn. And very often they either become millennials that say they're really interested more in, how should I put it, spiritualism. There probably is an overall spirit that has created the world and so on, as opposed to the people that say there is nothing. It just happened. What is that called? The immediate combustion or whatever the case might be.
Spontaneous combustion.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, everything just happened. Well, that is so different from what happened in the past. For example, when we were growing up, and because I'm starting to show my age, we only had like a couple of channels on the TV.
Yeah.
Now there's hundreds of channels on the TV.
More than that. Yeah.
Or more. So the thing is this, that we're bombarded with all sorts of temptations. I hate to use that word,
I
but
think
you know what I'm
the
saying.
operative word is simply a distraction.
Completely.
We are constantly looking to be distracted from reality. Have you ever been in a room where the power goes out and there's no TV?
Oh.
People must get up 15 times in 2 hours to try and turn the TV on even though the power's out.
Exactly.
Well, at least we can watch TV. No, you're not. How? Well, we've got the iPad.
You're right.
Well, I got a question for you. How are you going to power up that iPad once you run out of juice? Well, that's easy. I'm going to go charge it up in the car. Well, why don't we just sit around and maybe play cards?
Sure.
Why don't we just sit around and do something really stupid but kind of fun called talking to each other?
That's right. That's right.
You know, this has been going on for years and years and years. Well, no more than 15 when you go back to the advent of the internet, basically. That goes back to the early 90s, but the smartphone is not that old.
No.
It's not even a teenager. Well, it is a teenager, but a very, very young item to be carrying around, totally owning us. Totally owning us. And it's shocking now, getting back to your point about when we were kids, my dad would say, I don't care what you do when you turn 18. When you're living under my roof, you're going to do as I say and what I do, and we're going to Mass.
Yeah.
That was it. Nowadays, you put an iPad in front of a 2-year-old. People are doing this.
Oh, they are.
And then they're starting to have rules and regs for a 5-year-old. And a lot of people listening to me and you right now have that very situation on their hands.
Yes.
It's ultimately a distraction.
I don't know if there's any other way of expressing it, but we did not have the capability of going beyond 4 channels on TV years ago.
Yeah.
Now we laugh at that. That's an impossibility. What do you mean 4 channels? That's it? 4 channels on the TV? Is that all? Well, we didn't have internet, tweets, Facebook, all of those different things.
Well, we didn't have cable TV. That was the first one. I remember watching the guy run the wires. I'd pull the car over and say, hey, listen, when are we going to be fired up? The guy'd say, well, I think in about 3 weeks. Oh, here it comes.
Sure.
Here comes cable. But that's when it was like 50 channels. And it was like, I'll never have time to watch all of these. Now you can't count the number of channels, including streaming channels, if you want to call it that. Streaming sites, that's the correct term.
Yeah, I know what you're
saying. For 2, 3, 4-year-old kids.
Yeah, because God is competing against all of these things because these 2, 3, and 4-year-old kids, they grow up. So by the time they're 17, 16, 13, where do I turn? And there's so many things to turn to. God is just an aside. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've heard that word, but I don't believe in it, this type of thing. I believe in my computer more than I do in this particular God, whatever it is. So we've lost the sense of Jesus Christ. We've lost the sense of God in general. And you're right. We've talked about millennials before. Millennials do believe in some type of spiritualism,
right?
But not necessarily religion that's got rules and regulations and so on and so forth.
Who says my God has to be Catholic? Who says that?
And then, we even have churches today, churches I call them, but they're organizations that are made up of all ex-Catholics, okay?
Yeah.
They've given up the faith so that they can be part of this other thing, which is, it's a feel-good type. And I don't want to even call it a religion. It is. I suppose it is a religion. They believe in some sort of a spirit. They believe in the full body development so that they have exercises, they have music, but not necessarily related to scripture or anything of this sort. So that they go on a Sunday or on a Saturday, not necessarily to worship, but to be part of this large group.
Yeah, but don't you think that's at least better than just saying, I don't believe at all, any way, shape, or form, in a deity, in God? I mean, wouldn't you prefer somebody at least, possibly by doing that interaction with that spirituality and that facility that they're going to with, they obviously are teaching be nice, be kind, feel good, assist. They may do a hunger drive. They may do a clothing drive.
Of course, yeah.
So they're still doing good.
They're doing good.
And you feel good because of that. So that's not all bad.
No, and I agree with you that that's not all bad. But the idea of Christianity as a religion seems to be losing some sort of grip on people.
Because people are not used to structure anymore.
No, they don't want structure.
Yeah, they don't. No, that's the millennial credo.
Yeah,
it really is. I mean, we started to see it with the Google offices and the Apple offices, and I'm not opposed to it, by the way, because it seems to be working for this generation where, ping pong tables, pool tables, common areas where people can just take a break. There are actually physical fitness facilities on site now for people. There's not that 8 to 5, 9 to 5 structure.
No, bring your children to work, or don't go to the office at all.
But at the
work
end of the
out
day,
of home.
the P&L seems to be doing okay. Assets equal liability plus proprietorship. Yeah. Mr. Murphy taught me that.
That's great.
Yeah, in my sophomore year in high school at Brother Rice. Assets equal liabilities plus proprietorship. Well, he always told me that when you walk up to me in 25 years, what's the first thing to come out of your mouth? Assets equal liabilities plus proprietorship.
And it worked.
And I've never forgotten it. But getting back to those, I'll call them evangelicals, if you will, the gatherings, the up with people groups.
Sure.
And I'm not saying anything bad, so if you think I am, I'm not. I'm trying,
no, I agree with you.
I'm trying to put it in a proper position. I don't think that's all bad. You would prefer a little more structure to your attention to God.
Definitely. I would prefer more of a belief in God and a personal God, a God that calls you by name. I do believe in that.
Yeah.
Now, as I say, that is happening. I don't know where it's going to end up, but we are losing people to a generic type form of gatherings as opposed to worship. I don't know what you call it.
Well,
but,
we'll for the sake of the podcast, we'll just now and forever refer to it as the Upward Peoples.
The Upward Peoples, or whatever the case might be.
The Upward persons.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make fun of them either.
Nor
it's
am
just
I,
a matter
no.
of they're very good people. They're people that seem to have their own set of ethics.
The heart is in the right place.
Yes, their heart is in the right place. They try to love people the way they want to be loved, and that's the key, except that they're leaving Jesus out of it. They're leaving God out of it. It's just more of a natural human inclination to be nice to people so that they will be nice to you, that type of thing.
What do you think, though? Asking you to look out into the future, and neither one of us will be here 25 or 50 years from now unless modern medicine, and I'm hoping, really comes up with some really good medicine over the next 5 to 10 years. That's where you're supposed to laugh, by the way. If you and I live to be 125 or so, that we're doing pretty good.
That is pretty
good.
But
given that, do you see the trend line continuing to go down?
Well, for me, where I am at church every week, and I see in some churches we have the group seems to be dwindling to an extent, but not really. It still maintains a great set of parishioners that come on a regular basis and so on. Needless to say, it's not the way it was 10 years ago, but it's there. People are still getting married in the church. People are still being buried in the church. So there are people that are still continuing that. Now, where it's going to end, I don't know, because I don't see that happening completely. It's not that drastic. If it is going to happen, it's not that drastic yet, okay? I don't see where we're going to have empty churches. I mean, generally speaking, we don't right now. We still have churches that are viable, working, and so on and so forth. We still have parishioners who are believers, people that do acts of mercy because of their love of Christ, following Christ and taking care of the poor. And so Christ is not out of the picture completely. Okay?
No, I'm not even suggesting.
And how should I put it? I don't know. I really don't have that insight. I certainly haven't done enough studies to see what the future is going to be for Catholicism, if we are speaking about Catholicism. But all the mainstream churches, whether it be Catholic, Lutheran, or whatever the case might be, yes, they're all going through these losing parishioners type thing, but it's not to the point where, okay, maybe a year from now we're going to have to close this church.
I was just going to ask you that. You're on the front lines. You would know. You have those discussions. You go to a lot of different events where you're running across your fellow priests.
Sure.
What is the discussion out there about? Do they see another round of closings coming?
Well, the possibility is always there because of demographics. And so what the population, because of prosperity, moves about. People used to live in one area. Once they've made it, as it were, they move to the next higher up area, then to whatever is the next higher up area. So, needless to say, the churches that were built so many years ago, beautiful churches, because people saw them as monuments almost. And so the immigrants who came from Poland, the people who came from Ireland, Italy, and so on and so forth, they built these beautiful monuments to the Lord. And so we see that they exist, but nobody goes there anymore. They do go to the ones that are in the suburbs. They do go to... So demographics has a lot to do with it. I see very often, too, that many of the churches in the past, there were 3 or 4 sometimes in just one block,
Yeah.
And you just didn't need that as we look at it today, but that's the way they did it. And so they were filled maybe at that time because there was so many immigrants, but once they started to thin out, well, you didn't need 3 churches on one block. And so little by little, they would have to close at least 1, maybe 2, and eventually 3. If you look at our beautiful city of Detroit, you find that so many of the churches that are in that city, the old city, you'll find that their beautiful architecture is out of this world.
Yeah.
And so, they've had those mob masses, they would call them, just so people could go and appreciate and see the architecture and to see the reverence with which people built those churches. Now, the population is no longer in those areas, so what do they have to do? They have to move. Then, people that moved, let's say 30 years ago, to the great suburbs are now elderly.
Yeah.
And so
Funny,
they are starting to die off.
Yeah.
The young people can't afford those beautiful mansions, okay?
Right.
And I'm speaking generally, okay? So they're not there anymore. So maybe even the churches in the, in quotes, the high-rent areas, the young people will have to support them, but they're not in the same category as the elderly that have been there and so on. And maybe they don't want to support them the way the elderly did. So that's another thing. Now, granted, Detroit is having a reawakening, and therefore there are beautiful places that are being built in Detroit. Matter of fact, I was reading where they're even building some condos that are going for $1.5 million, $1.2 million, and so on.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many they're building, maybe 2 or 3 or 4,
right.
But it'll be interesting to see if that really takes off.
Yeah. We did a podcast just 3 or 4 weeks ago where we were talking about Padre Pino and how the Holy Family Church, 2,000 strong and going well, and that's in Detroit.
Sure.
You know, and you still have, like you said, the mass mobs lifting it up, keeping it going. So that's a good thing. But again, just to sort of put a bow on this one, I'm hoping that it's stabilizing. Let's hope that our numbers are stabilizing.
Yeah, I would hope the same thing.
And I think a big part of it could be reinforced by what's going on in the grade schools and the high schools. I think as long as people continue to support Catholic education the way they do because of the education, they have that additional assist that are going to continue to help stabilize where we are right now.
Yeah, as long as they don't become distracted by what we said before.
Right.
There's so many things aiming at them that they could easily become, and they do become distracted.
Yeah,
but I agree with you.
Including their
great.
hormones and their ability to, get out there and have some fun at the college level. Well, thank you once again for a brilliant job, as only you can do. This canvas is just loaded with these beautiful, beautiful podcasts that are signed each and every week by Father Giuseppe Grimaldi. And they're going to be worth a fortune someday. Someday. And I'm donating all of your money to the church.
Well, I hope so.
I would think you would have it no other way, my friend.
I wouldn't.
Don't forget to share the good word, the Father Joe podcast. If you have a friend or two that you think might enjoy listening to the podcast, tell them how easy it is to get. It's at all the usual sites and places where you can go. It's the Father Joe podcast.
See you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you around, everybody. Bye-bye.
This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.